Hello and welcome to the Sunset Gratitude Summit. I'm your host, Emily Silva Hoekstra, the author of Sunset Gratitude. Today I'm speaking with April Wilkner, an actor, broadcast journalist, and mental health professional. She's also a first responder who works as a crisis counselor for Pound 988, the suicide hotline. I'm really excited to share this interview with you and hope you find it as valuable as I did. Let's get right into it. Hi, April. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm very excited to talk to you.
I'm really excited to talk to you. This is one of my favorite topics. Not grief, but I think with grief, hope. And hope is one of my favorite topics.
Let's jump into it. How do you find hope after grief?
I actually think hope is not something that's found after grief. I think hope is something you find throughout and amid grief. I think that is the biggest takeaway that I've gotten from being a crisis counselor on 988 suicide hotline. I've personally learned that grief and hope can coexist. Sadness and joy and laughter can coexist. It's not a linear path, these emotions. They are a cyclic and ongoing thing.
Very true. And it seems to be the theme in all of these interviews is that you can hold both things at once. You can be sad and happy at the same time, but you deal a lot with grief and hope on your day to day at the crisis center. Can you tell me a little bit about how you feel? We spoke previously about the waiting room of hope, how they come to you and it's the last spark of hope.
For some people, and for some people, it's not the first time that they have come to us to reignite that last spark of hope. My experience of working as a crisis counselor has been that 988 is a place that people come because they've made a very, very brave and beautiful choice that in their sometimes moment of darkest despair, while they're experiencing their deepest grief and sadness, even to the brink of considering no longer choosing to stay alive, they have yet enough hope inside of them to make the choice to connect with another human being. And I think that's something that when people you see the poster for 988 or hear the word suicide hotline, that can be easily missed. The part that the people who we speak to, they are choosing to reach out. This isn't a police intervention or an emergency rescue at the beginning of a call or a chat. This is one individual who's experiencing, in many cases, deep levels of pain, and yet they have made a choice to have faith that perhaps a complete stranger could help ease some of that pain, or at least get them through it and hold their hand. And to me, that's a beautiful thing. That's an inspiring thing.
It gives me chills.
Yeah.
It's sad and hopeful at the same time that you're in this space to be that for someone. What got you into crisis counseling?
So I have contacted a suicide hotline. I did it one time in my late 20s, so a little, over a decade ago. I was experiencing and do experience suicidal ideation myself. I was not at a place where I had a plan or I was acting on it, which I say that because those are important things that we delineate on the hotline. But it was an experience that I had when I was feeling at the end of my rope and really at a loss for how to deal with it. Because of that experience, I'm an actor, and my agent reached out to me, I think about 5 years ago, to ask if I had ever contacted a suicide hotline because they were casting a national commercial for what was then called Lifeline, alongside Logic's song, and they released it at the Grammys. So for me, that was a turning point. I was cast in the commercial with other real life people who had contacted a suicide hotline, and I in a way was sort of outed for the fact that I had had those kinds of thoughts. For the first time shared that with my friends and family because I didn't want them to see it on a national commercial and then be like, excuse me. Um, and I was so overwhelmed in a good way with the positive response and support that I got. I feared that people would judge me, or there would be a lot of, oh, well, what does she have to feel suicidal about? And that really inspired and motivated me to be more vocal and honest about my own mental health journey in all areas of my life. 5 years ago, that was still a pretty scary choice. I think we've come a long way in 2024. Mental health is a hot button topic, and it's almost applauded now to be more transparent and honest. And I could not be happier about that change. But back then, it was still a little, or, are some of my friends going to be awkward about this, not want to talk about it? Um, and so at the end of 2019, when I was sort of at an impasse in my life, I was trying to figure out what way forward if I was going to continue with acting, which I have, and continue with broadcasting. And I decided to try on mental health as a career lane with no experience and not wanting to go back to school and, get a huge amount of debt. I thought, well, let me start with volunteering.
Mm.
So I Googled suicide volunteering, and
Wow.
Dee Dee Hirsch's program came up first thing. And the next month, I began the pretty rigorous, intensive training program to become a crisis counselor for 988 Suicide Hotline.
How long did it take you?
It was a 3 months process every weekend, full, I think, 8 to 10 hour days on a Saturday, Sunday, plus multiple required at-home testing and training in the week. So you really had to put many things on your life on hold in order to complete that training, as I think you should. It should be an intense training. I don't think just anyone should be at the other end of these calls or texts. And it was a really incredible experience for me, even from the moment I walked in the room before we began training, because it was the first time I'd ever walked into a room where I knew likely every single person who's here has either been touched by suicide in some way in that they experienced a loss, which I also have more
Mm.
than once, or they personally understand it. And that immediately made that space a very safe and special place for me. And it continues to be so to this day. Now I'm an employee, transitioned from volunteer. It's one of the greatest gifts of my whole life to be a part of that. I call it my SPC, Suicide Prevention Center family, because that's what we are.
Well, I can understand being scared to share something like that as a public figure because when I met you, we were at in Idlewild at a shop called Wildland, and I thought I recognized you, and I couldn't place you. It was also during COVID, and I think you had a mask on. Um,
Yeah, it was a
but
tight space.
you were just very familiar to me, and then I found out who you were, and the more that I've gotten to know you, it was like, wait, she has grief? Because I remember watching you on America's Next Top Model and thinking, wow, her life is amazing. She's so beautiful. And I think you just humanize this whole other world that so many of us look at like, man, they've got it easy.
And that was my fear. That was a huge fear of mine when I decided to do the national commercial, because I was very aware that at that time, what public following I had, which is, minuscule compared to many people, was from Top Model, and which is a very obviously image centric, put you on a pedestal, make you look a certain way that isn't realistic show. And I just really was terrified that people would shame me, publicly shame me for not, I think it's called gratitude shaming, when we don't give ourselves permission to feel sadness or feel grief when we can see with both of our eyes clearly that we do live a blessed life.
Mhm.
Um, that's the other, I think, really valuable thing I've learned and been able to witness working as a crisis counselor, how the level of someone's circumstances in life, meaning like the amount of, pardon my French, but like SHIT that gets thrown at them. And I get unbelievably insurmountable experiences. I hear about unbelievably insurmountable experiences on the line that you couldn't believe one person's been through.
Mm.
Their level of grief and sadness could still be the same as a person who, let me just use one example, especially with kids now, had a breakup with a boy they've been dating for a week.
Yeah.
By comparison, it might seem different than someone who suffered extreme years of trauma or abuse,
Mhm.
um, and is a survivor. But that doesn't, it shows me that circumstances don't matter. It's the intensity of your grief that is your reality. And we, we need to, I think, as a society, stop judging circumstances so much and really just be more open to, okay, but what is this person's feeling
Mhm.
right now?
Yeah, stop gaslighting the emotions. Grief is a big emotion and it's overwhelming and you can feel like you're drowning. And if they get to the point where they're calling a hotline, it is drowning.
Yeah, they're drowning. They're standing in a storm of rain. And look, every storm runs out of rain, right? That does, and it may come back again. There will be an ending point for a moment at least. And I think a lot of times what our job is to not solve their life problems, but to just hold their hand to get them through to that next moment and survive. And I think a mistake that a lot of people make in real life when they're trying to support a friend or family member who is struggling deeply with grief is they do typically three things wrong, which, to be fair, I would have absolutely done wrong as well before I had this training, and maybe I still do when I'm not on shift. The first thing they do is they try to fix everything. You know, the type A maternal types, like, oh, well, then you need a new job, or you should move to a new city, or da 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 da. When someone's in that intense and deep a stage of grief, usually they're not ready to activate into finding a solution. So being told a list of ways that you can fix your grief almost feels like you're being shamed for having that grief and not taking those steps yourself. The second thing that people tend to do wrong is deny a person's weather. So like you said, grief is like you're standing in this huge, deep storm. You're really underwater and you come to someone and express that to them and they sort of, look out the window and go, oh, but it's so sunny out, what are you talking about? And that can sound like, oh, but your life's perfect, look at your beautiful children and your wonderful job and your beautiful house. You're saying, I don't see the rain, it looks gorgeous. And then that person who's drowning in a river is just that much more alone. So now the first person's throwing them a life raft. They don't want it. Second person is said, what do you mean? I don't see any water. And what they want usually is someone to just take a step into the water. I'm not
Mhm.
talking about codependence and drowning with them, but just hold their hand in the current and let them talk. Which brings me to the third point. Keep the flashlight pointed at them.
Mm.
Don't point it back at yourself. A lot of people will say something like, oh, I know exactly what you're going through. I've been through the same thing, and here's what I did. And that is turning the story onto you, even though it might feel like you're empathizing and relating, it's still making it about you instead of keeping the light on them. And if you make it about you, then they're still sitting in the dark.
Yes, you can stop with I understand.
Yeah.
I feel like one of the biggest things that ever happened in the darkest days of grief for me was a friend who just sat there. She didn't even say anything. And it was like, oh, I'm not alone right now. Do you ever have calls where you're just sitting there?
To be honest, most people are pretty expressive.
That's
It
interesting.
may be that it's a certain personality type that chooses to reach out, is maybe a communicative personality type. It is pretty rare that we have long moments of silence. I can say that after 4 years now. What we will occasionally have, or what I've experienced, is a person who isn't quite ready at the top to talk specifically about what they're going through, and they just need a moment to calm down because they're spiraling. And so in that case, I'll walk them through a visual exercise or a breathing exercise. I've got, a million of these in my back pocket that I use myself.
Mhm.
And that to me feels sort of like we're just holding hands sitting across from each other, and we're not beginning the conversation of what's happening. We're just taking a beat. So it's not so much silence, but it's stopping time, if that makes sense.
So you're not hopping on like, what happened? What do you need?
Yeah, no. No.
That's very interesting. So you've been doing this for 4 years, and it seems to be quite fulfilling to you.
It's the most fulfilling thing in my life.
Mhm.
I can say that with complete certainty. And I have many things in my life that bring me joy, that I love being an actor. I love broadcasting, especially now that I get to utilize that to talk about these important topics like mental health. I love being an artist. I love painting. I love poetry. But being a crisis counselor for the suicide hotline, the best way I can explain it is the moment I sat down for my first shift, when I was taking calls on the phone line and I finished my first call, it was like a wooden board was strung through my back, up my head, that planted me with purpose in a way that nothing else in my entire life had ever done. And I was almost turning 40. So I'd lived some life by that point and had passions and things I will still call a calling. But that feeling that this is where you belong, that was the first time I felt that. And I feel that every time I sit down to do my shift still.
Why do you think it happened for you at that point in your life?
I think because I was honestly having a really hard time.
Mm.
I'll be completely transparent about that. At the end of 2019, when I sought out this program, I was not in a great place. I had moved to LA to pursue acting, and things were not going well. They are now going well, I'm happy to say. Um, I was financially not in a great place, and I was considering taking a job in broadcasting back east that was by far not a dream job. It would have been okay just to get this paycheck and get back on my feet. And I hate making decisions based on that because I think that's a fear-based decision. And I was looking for answers. I was looking for something deeper and bigger than me to keep me moving forward, in a way to distract me from the things in my life that had become my focus, that were causing me pain in that moment. Um, and I'm not religious. I was not raised with any religion. I dropped to my knees and I prayed and I said, I need answers. And how can I be of service? Because I believe in karma and energy deeply. That is the one thing I can say I religiously believe. And I thought, okay, if I'm asking a lot from the universe right now, I need help to help me get to the next step. I know that I need to offer something. And intuitively, I just thought, well, that's a very specific thing that I personally know about and maybe can be of service, is suicide, suicidal ideation, and depression and mental health anxiety. It was born from that place. It remains to be this very central, purposeful part of my life, the most purposeful part of my life.
And a Google search led you here.
Yeah. A Google search plus, when I saw Dee Dee Hirsch come up, I had remembered I had taken an Uber recently and driven by the center, which originally was the call center I worked out of before we all moved remotely. And they have this huge, glittering, beautiful sign that says Suicide Prevention Center.
Mm.
And it's intentional that it's there. They want to send the universe the message that it's okay to use the word suicide. And it's so okay, we're going to put it right outside our beautiful building. And so I was so happy when I saw that sign, I think a few months before, that, oh, wow, there's a whole center dedicated to this. And they're using the word, they're not sweeping it under the rug. So when I saw it again in the Google search, I connected those dots and thought, oh, maybe there was a reason I drove by that.
Probably. I believe that.
I do.
So, with the word suicide and us not wanting to really use it, but the statistics are telling us that it's prevalent.
Hugely.
Do you find that the word is being used more easily now?
It's a hard question to answer because all of our devices and our media exposure is so calculated to the algorithm that is us. So I am constantly seeing mental health, suicide prevention, wellness, and funny looking animals on my feed. So to me, it feels like it's everywhere. But I don't know if that is really the truth.
Mhm.
It certainly seems like it's way more places than it was just 5 or 6 years ago.
Do you feel that the clientele that you speak to is changing or shifting, or has it always been across the board the same? It doesn't discriminate age, race.
I know that it's changing.
Mm,
There's studies and statistics on that. So when I began as a counselor, the number one demographic for suicide, the most at-risk group, were white males in their late 30s to early 50s, basically the father,
mhm,
um, and veterans. And reason being, this is the patriarch of the family who, feels all this pressure to maybe pay bills or is a stay-at-home father, whichever the case. And typically, I think men still are working towards having a less difficult time feeling free to express their emotions. So that group was the highest at risk when I began as a counselor. Now, tragically, the most at-risk group is youth.
mm.
There's been a 40% increase in the rate of suicides for minors from 2003 to 2024, a 40% increase. I believe that's just in America. It's tragic, and it's a huge, in my mind, emergency level problem we're experiencing. And I do firsthand see that, especially now because I've transitioned from calls to taking chats and texts. There's way more demand for that now. I am very frequently, maybe over 75% speaking to minors.
Oh my goodness, April, that's really sad.
It's sad, but at the same time, and this is what I always tell people, I'm glad that they're here talking to me. I'm glad that they're using, if they have a cell phone or a computer or an iPad, because we know so many of these kids now are glued to their screen. If those are the numbers, if these innocent, beautiful children are going to be experiencing suicidal ideation, then it doesn't make me sad to be talking to them. It makes me so glad and hopeful that they are coming here to talk to us, to get support, to feel heard. And in a way, if it's their devices that they're using to access that, I'm grateful sometimes for this new technology, because back in the 80s, what would a child have done?
Yeah.
They wouldn't pick up the kitchen phone in front of their parents to have this conversation. So to me, that is the beautiful thing about the iPhones and the iPads and the computers that the kids are on. At least some of them are using it to ask for really important help.
Is there anything we can do for the children in our life that may be feeling this way?
I know there's been a lot of education going on in schools. I think that's helpful. I think giving them permission to use the word, resources for after a child experiences the suicide loss of a peer. That happened recently within my circle, within my family. And I think it's important that these kids hear, as you said, hear the word suicide, and that it's not a taboo topic to be spoken of in schools. Because if they are having these thoughts and feelings and they think they're the only one, that's the recipe for disaster. I think that we can survive deep levels of grief and sadness if we are still choosing to connect. Where the tipping point happens, where we lose someone, is because they're experiencing those deep levels of grief and sadness, and they are alone in that. You cannot survive with that. You need connection, you need hope, you need communication. So I think the very simple answer is to talk about it. We need to be talking about this in schools. The kids need to know that they can go to their school counselor. if they're not comfortable talking to their parents, because there are still a lot of religious or cultural barriers around that. To me, it's just the more conversations that can be had about it in schools, the better.
Communication and connection are two antidotes to suicidal ideation.
I did a grief training yesterday,
Okay.
and something really profound was said. They said, connection is the opposite of suicide.
Hmm.
I thought, well, that's so
Powerful.
interesting, because they said suicide is death, right? It's
Mhm.
reaching such the edge of that tidal wave of grief that you make the choice to no longer continue living. But before that choice is made, I think another choice is made to no longer choose to connect with another person before you take your life. And the hotline is this portal where, before that choice is made for many people, maybe for one last time in their mind, they're making the choice to connect. And over 98% of the people we connect with de-escalate. So the proof's in the pudding. Connection is the antidote to suicide.
How can we connect better?
I think we can be more honest with each other. And I'm an actor. It is kind of a group that our currency is honesty. That's what we're asked to do as artists. So I am blessed to have a community like that. But I think in general, when you step outside that world of creatives and artists where that's revered, there's still a lot of, oh, how are you doing? Oh, I'm fine. Oh, no, great. Or, you slap, look, I've got makeup on today, right? We still slap makeup on, we do our hair, we put on a great outfit, which I'm not belittling. If it makes you feel good from the outside, that can make you feel good from the inside. But in general, as a society, I do still think many of us, self included, with a large percentage of the people in our lives, just show our best foot forward side or choose to connect only when we're feeling like our best selves.
Mhm.
And I
Yes.
think, I don't know about you, but when someone struggles with depression or anxiety, we tend to hide, right?
Yes.
It's scary to connect when you're feeling that way. I don't deny that it is. Like, I've got literally two people in my life that when I'm in my level 10 state of that, I need to connect to, and I do, but they are my safe space.
Mhm.
And it's not like I'm reaching out to, my 10 best friends in that state. It's human. But I do think that's the answer, to slowly push that bar a little wider. And I do think it's something, if we collectively do, progress can be made. If you see someone being a little more transparent, let's say even on something like Instagram, it can inspire you, to say, oh, they did it and their whole world didn't come crashing down. Maybe even they were revered for it. Not that that's the point, but if
Yeah.
we can take those baby steps, I really think we can move the needle in the right direction. And I think it is happening. I do think, again, it could be my algorithm showing this to me, but I do feel like I see this applauding of transparency.
Mhm.
I have a background in modeling. I definitely see it in advertising compared to, say, the 90s and the early 2000s, where it's a more natural look, a more all-inclusive look. That shift is happening, and I think that is tremendously helpful.
So finding the one or two people that are our safe space when we are at our level 10 to say, hey, I'm at my level 10, but also encouraging others to share their stories, maybe after they've integrated or in the middle of it. How do you feel about that?
I think it's a very individual thing. I think when some people are in intense pain, they really need to connect. Like, forget about the suicide hotline, just to the people
Yeah.
in their lives. Other people need to shut down and self-protect. If
Mhm.
they can stay safe, they need to not speak. They need to have privacy.
Mhm.
They need to not be bombarded with text messages. So everyone is different, and everyone handles grief differently, and everyone needs something different when they're in intense pain. I think the work comes in figuring out what it is that you need and then being willing to communicate that to the people in your inner circle, like your loved ones, your partners, your family, your best friends, so that they can support you.
And in order to find out what it is we need, we kind of have to welcome stillness and let the intuition speak. And that's really hard in our ever connected world. Like it's so easy for our phones to tell us what we need. How do you find stillness? Because you're a very front facing person. What do you do to welcome stillness into your life?
I'll be very honest with you.
Okay.
Stillness is something I don't even know if you noticed. We had a conversation over Zoom a few months ago. I was very aware during that conversation of how much I was moving. I was like, because I work on camera, so I take note of like where I'm rusty. And you're so still, Emily. And I know you teach yoga, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So your energy is almost profoundly still. And I was very aware of that. And like I said, this is a very new thing for me. Even just a few months ago, I was physically running away from my feelings.
Mm.
I have, as of this month and a half now, for the first time in my life, begrudgingly began doing yoga every single day. And I was the girl that said, I hate yoga. I hate yoga. I'm a New Yorker. I'm moving to LA. Everyone here does juice cleanses and they're vegan and they do yoga, and no judgment on those people. But I was like, no, I refuse. That's not me. I'm like a closet. I've drank the Kool-Aid yoga girl now.
Yay.
And I've never felt more comfortable being still
Hmm.
and more connected to my breath. I hate that I'm saying these things. I hate the cliche of it, but it's true. And so I realized how important, and people say it all the time, but when you're living it, it actually clicks. The mind-body connection is, I'm someone that needs to treat my symptoms of depression and anxiety physically.
Hmm.
I can't solve it up here because
Hmm.
this is where all the problems are created. For me, I need to solve it physically. I need to breathe. I need to move or not move. And I need to move in a way that is present with my body. Because trust me, take it from me, you can work out, hard and be completely disconnected from your body.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. And I think some people are. So you think, oh, I'm moving my body. No, but I will say yoga is the one thing where it's pretty hard to do it and be disconnected from your body because it requires presence or you'll tip over and fall, which I do.
True. But you can always start again.
Yeah, yeah. So it's been a pretty amazing last month and a half for me, adding that layer to my self-care. I'm a student of my own mental health, and I will be for the rest of my life. Maybe yoga's the thing now, and a year from now, it'll not serve me, and I'll need to start boxing. Like, who knows? But I feel like I study my brain and I study my moods and I take notes and I adjust. And I think we all, in a way, if we want to feel good most of the time, do need to take our mental health seriously, make it a priority, and pay attention to what things and people and communities in your life make you feel good and what things don't make you feel good.
Yeah, I love the mind body connection because you can look amazing and then just be a mess in your head, and vice versa. You could be like,
Welcome to modeling.
oh, I know. Imagine.
That's not fair. There's actually some beautiful, healthy models in the industry that I've had the pleasure of calling a friends. I do think sometimes they get a bad rap, the industry, but for reasons,
But has it shifted more that mental health has become more important?
I'm sure it has. To be honest, I'm not super active in that world anymore, and
Yeah.
it never felt authentic to me.
Hmm.
Never has. Anytime someone introduces me at, say, a party, and they're sort of, doing the, oh, here's what she does, and they lead with model, I literally physically cringe. And that's my own stuff, and I got to own it. But I realize, paying attention to that title, that lane in my life, is never something that felt true to me. And
Mm.
it's definitely not something I ever felt pride in. I guess
It
how,
sounds like you found your calling near 40 and you have pride in this work and you have found something that has brought fulfillment, and I can see it in your eyes when you're speaking of it. It is what you are on this earth to do, and you're making an impact, which is so important.
it's, yes, I do. I think of everything I do, have the most pride in the fact that I am a crisis counselor. And I'm the most grateful that I have the opportunity to do that. I think it's so important to say an outsider to the hotline might think, oh, the people who call the hotline are so lucky to have the support of a crisis counselor. And I truly, truly believe, and I know that my colleagues would agree with me, we are the lucky ones because we get this gift night after night of getting to step into this kind of magical portal and experience the beautiful act of a person in incredible pain being so brave and so inspiring. I am so inspired by the stories that I hear because they're a real reality check. If
Mhm.
you're feeling like, oh, you've had a hard day, this is just me personally, and you get a glimpse of what someone else's day or year or life has been, it's not just gratitude of, oh, your circumstance versus theirs. It's being so inspired by that is their life, which has been so hard. And yet, look at the choice they are making to still have hope and try to figure this out. It's heroic. Reaching out, being on the other end of that line. To me, I feel like I'm witnessing a hero in action. And I freely tell them, I'm very candid on the hotline. I try to be as non-robotic as possible and speak from, from the hip and can't self-disclose. But if I think that about someone, especially when these are kids, I'll be like, hats off to you, and then they're so grateful to be given that respect and to see that that's how someone else can see them in that moment as heroic and brave and a badass, while they're experiencing this pain. We're the lucky ones. I really think that. And I know I'm not alone in feeling that.
Well, you had to go through pain, and younger April can hold up this mirror for these now brave badasses that are calling you. And I don't think you could be there with such an impact if you didn't overcome your own struggles. And so it is very brave of you. And I want to point out the badassery inside of you that brought you to today to be able to sit there on these very hard phone calls or texts and hold that space with so much respect, kindness, and empathy.
Thank you. It's in a way, the reason it's been such a blessing to do this work is for the first time in my life, maybe outside of acting, because acting also allows you to do that through storytelling. I got to take these things that I experienced that were formerly maybe in the bad category or the, oh, I wish I didn't category, like anxiety, like depression, like suicidal ideation, and go, oh, this is my secret weapon. These are actually my superpowers
Mm,
in this world. Because without me personally understanding how it feels for me, I don't think I would be able to support people in the way that I do. And so I'm grateful to have that mixed soup of emotions in my life and not just have this like candy coated, everything's great life. Because I don't think I would A, be a crisis counselor if I hadn't. And
mm-mm.
B, I don't think I'd be a good one if I hadn't. So it gives you gratitude for those things that maybe you wished were not a part of your life before. And that is a beautiful full circle moment to experience.
Yeah. Well, you know, I'm all about gratitude, and you've said it twice in the last 10 minutes. What are you most grateful for right now?
I'm grateful for so much right now. And that's not always true. I say this because it's like, you're getting me on a good day. I'll admit that you're getting me on a good week. I'm grateful for the opportunity to be an actor and to tell stories and create stories that matter. I'm grateful to be a host and to be able to shed light on other people's stories by interviewing them and telling their story to the world so that people can hopefully feel less alone if they connect to something in
Yeah.
that story. I'm grateful for the house I live in. I think every morning I go out and I stand in the yard and I let the sun in my eyes, and I just appreciate the beautiful nature that's around me. I haven't always had that in Los Angeles, but the last 5 years have been a blessing. And to have this beautiful yard at my fingertips, especially coming from New York where I didn't, I'm super grateful for that space. And I'm grateful for the freedom to travel. I'm about to go on a trip to Japan that I've been putting off for 4 years. And
Wow.
I'm very, very, very excited to do that. I know that's a real privilege, to be able to go there and to visit some of my family history and just experience that.
I'm very grateful that you were so candid today and shared your story and were willing to speak with me about grief because it's a tough topic and you dove right in with me. So thank you so much, April.
Of course, it's my pleasure.
Where can people find you and what is the information for the hotline if they need it?
So the information for the hotline now is super simple. Lifeline has turned into 988. So you can call 988 from any phone and connect to a crisis counselor 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for free. You can also chat or text 988 from your phone. So you can, the way we send a normal text message, you literally text 988 and you'll initially get sort of an automated pre-chat survey, which helps us just get some information about who you are. And then hopefully in not much time at all after that, you will be speaking to someone like me live. Or if you don't have a phone, you can do it through the chat modality. I think the website, if you Google 988, it should come up.
I can
Many,
also add the link at the
that would
bottom.
be great. Yeah. I know the Trevor Project, many different organizations have portals. I work for Dee Hirsch, but there's a few different call centers. Um, for me, I have a website. It's a little outdated. It's aprilwilkner.com. I think I need to restructure it because there's nothing really about mental health on there. It's mainly acting, modeling, broadcasting. I do have Instagram. I'm currently on a social media break.
Good for you.
Not super active on it, I'm not gonna lie, but it's there, and you can see some of the mental health interviews, and the pieces I've produced for American Federation of Suicide Prevention on there. It's just my name, at April Wilkner.
Thank you so much, April.